A court reform expert and progressive political activist is blasting both the U.S. Supreme Court and the spouse of one of its justices after a bombshell Washington Post article revealed how Ginni Thomas headed a secretive right-wing organization funded through a web of dark money with the goal of waging a culture war against the left. Thomas, a Washington insider for decades, a well-known right-wing lobbyist and conspiracy theorist who had unprecedented access to the Trump White House and Oval Office, just happens to be the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Demand Justice founder Brian Fallon warned the Roberts Supreme Court has a reputation of behaving unethically, handing down questionable decisions, being overtaken with scandal, and riddled with ethical conflicts and influence peddling. Research that my group has done, we've noticed that part of what is animating this downward shift in opinion of the court is not just the highly unpopular, substantive rulings that are coming out of the court, and that's saying something because they're pretty unpopular. Fallon, the former Clinton campaign national press secretary and former DOJ director of public affairs, told MSNBC's Nicole Wallace, but it's also this idea that the court is behaving unethically, and that it's become overtaken with scandal. There's a feeling that not only is it reaching decisions that are questionable and unpopular, but it's also reaching them through illicit means, that the majority that Republicans have now on the Supreme Court, that 6-3 majority, was gained through illicit means, and that the way it's going about its business of hearing cases is just sort of riddled with ethical conflicts and influence peddling. Fallon warned that the Washington Post's report on Ginni Thomas, I think, would just further that narrative in the public's mind. Wallace, pointing to the Post's reporting, blasted Thomas's demented approach to ethics and transparency. The piece about funding is so stunning to me, because over here on Earth One, you would do the opposite, right? Wallace posited. If there were a non-profit that involved the spouse of a Supreme Court justice, you would take the path that would bring about more disclosure, more transparency. Ginni Thomas does the opposite. She basically buries and hides the funding through a workaround that may or may not be legal. It certainly isn't ethical or transparent. After criticizing Ginni Thomas for lobbying on issues Clarence Thomas could or does make decisions on, Fallon criticized her for the secretive organization she was heading, which she said was going after the left's cultural Marxism. Calling Thomas a fringe figure, Fallon observed, the people that she brought together for this nonprofit that received $600,000 was a rogues gallery of people that do not belong in polite society in Washington, D.C. You have the head of Project Veritas who's been criminally prosecuted for the shady activities of that group, Fallon alleged. He also pointed to the right-wing pro-Trump group Turning Point USA's founder, Charlie Kirk. These are people that say outrageous things that help provoke conspiracy theories that contributed to the riots to try to overturn the government. And Ginni Thomas is in league with all of them. This should be shocking and appalling to your average member of Congress on both sides of the aisle, and we don't see any movement from Republicans in the House to do anything in terms of an ethics bill, but it should be 100% uncontroversial at this point, to impose a mandatory code of ethics on the Supreme Court so that Clarence Thomas has to account for his wife's activities more so than he does have to right now.